Our next speaker is James Jennings. James is one of our vice chairs for ethnic minority Liberal Democrats. He joined the Lib Dems in 2005 and has been very actively involved in the EMLD since 2009. He was the one who actually initiated our strategic plan. And do we have copies available?
They're on the stand. So,
on the stand.
Yeah,
so if you want copies of our strategic plan, they're available at the EMLD stand. And he's also responsible for implementing it. So he's doing a lot of hard work at the moment. He also represents EMLD on the Diversity Engagement Group. James has a keen interest in aviation issues and is particularly interested in the aviation market in BRIC economies.
The BRICS.
Oh, yeah. The BRICS economies. Can you explain what the BRICS are?
The BRICS are a collection of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, who are going to be kind of like the big economies of the 21st century.
Okay. And also in the role aviation is playing in the growth and development of cities. So can I introduce James? Thank you very much indeed.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming along. At first, I was a bit worried that, since many Liberal Democrats are very passionate about the environment, and given what we had in our manifesto, which kind of prohibits aviation, I thought not many people will be turning up. But this is an issue that's really close to my heart in a number of aspects. First of all, I'm extremely passionate about aviation. Like Darren, I live under a flight path in London, and like Darren, I absolutely love it. I know which flights are coming in from which destination. So at 4:20 in the morning, there's the BA 0026 flight from Hong Kong, Boeing 747-400. And the is the Airbus A380, the Emirates, Qantas, and there is another one as well. I forgot which other airline operates into Heathrow. But those are the two key Singapore Airlines. So yes, and I've actually flown on that aircraft, and I think it's absolutely amazing. As I said, got involved in the aviation sector. I'm not just out of interest. Love flying. The first flight I took when I was 6 was to Kingston via Miami on Air Florida, which is now defunct. And then since then I've been flying BA. As a consequence of that, I've become a shareholder of its new parent company, IAG, which is in conjunction with Iberia. I have shares in Cathay Pacific. I also fly as well. I'm unashamed of that, but I also pay my tax offset to make sure that money is reinvested into environmental projects worldwide. So that's kind of a bit about me. Just to touch on what Ihsan is saying about the strategic plan for EMLD, part of that is for EMLD to have kind of like a broader policy base so that we look at issues that matter to black and minority ethnic communities. It's also a tool to find ways to actually encourage more of those communities to actually come into the party, to actually support us. So I see it as kind of like an influence circle whereby, people we see, people are interested in an issue, we work with them to make sure that issue reaches the higher echelons within party policy. They actually support the Liberal Democrats, and as a consequence, they actually become members of it. So we're going to be looking at several controversial issues over the next 3 years. So I thought I'd start off with this one. So I think it's a really important issue, as Darren says, because it has implications for UK PLC, LTD, third sector, the tourism market, etc. I got involved in 2010, and it was a debate that took place before the general election. It was a collection of organisations from the Caribbean, Filipino and Nigerian communities to look at international development issues. Got off into tandem because of politicians there, so I'll ask about anything. But one issue that came up constantly was about the air passenger duty. That largely came from the Caribbean community. As Darren has reiterated, they brought regional banding, distance banding into flights. In the Caribbean, you've got a really peculiar thing because a flight from London to Barbados is about 4,000 miles. However, if you're flying to LA, which is about nearly 6,000 miles, you're paying a lower tax from the Caribbean simply because the US is one band, but it's not banded on 4 separate areas. So they took it at the nearest point, which is Boston. So that's the problem. That's the problem that we have. And a lot of people were really passionate about it. They're really upset about it. The Green Party, of course, they had no response. The Conservatives, they didn't have a response. Labour, they had no response. And the Liberal Democrats had no response. So there's a glut of knowledge and information in that particular arena. And Darren's AOA has done some work in that in terms of asking MPs, what do they know about this tax, and not many know anything about it. And when you actually put the proposal to them, this is what's happening, then a lot of them want it scrapped. So that's particularly important. With this tax going up, it has affected the Caribbean community. They've been the first to be actually lobbying it. In terms of voting behaviour, a lot of black Caribbeans don't tend to vote for us. But with this tax going up, it is going to affect every single community, namely the South Asian community, the Pakistani community, who we rely a lot upon. And that is proof in the Runnymede Trust recent survey in terms of electoral behaviour from the last election. So it's going to have an adversarial impact on them. And as I forgot his name, Graham from Newcastle Airport, it's been talking about regionally, that is a big growth area. Pakistan International Airlines is one of the few carriers that I know in the world that flies regionally to any country in the world. So it serves Birmingham, it serves Manchester, it serves Leeds Bradford, and it serves Glasgow. So that's a massive market for them, and there's all this interconnectivity, which I want to go on to a second point, that envisages. So they use those flights regularly, and they're going to be raising their hands up. So we have to be really careful in terms of actually knowing what's happening, what the impacts on those communities are, and that to actually lobby, government, whoever, to actually say it's going to have an impact on those communities. Another group that we have to be aware of is some of the diaspora communities, the ones that who are here but don't have that have no certain characteristics. What I'm talking about is Australians, white South Africans, and also the Israeli community. The Israeli community is a massive diaspora organisation in the UK. If you look at the flight prices to Tel Aviv, there are so much money simply because of that demand, and also Nigerians. Flying to Lagos is extremely expensive, and it's very lucrative for carriers all over Europe. So it's going to have an impact on that particular area, and it's going to come to us come 2050 and what have you in terms of votes, and that's my fear that I have why we need to look at this particular issue. I'm going to quickly go into my other 2 points because the other 2 gentlemen have looked at it. On the economy, some of those issues have been raised up, but I just wanted to look at 3 areas of the economic aspect. For me, I'm into globalisation, I'm passionate about it, and as Graham has stated, regional connectivity is extremely important. Some of the stuff that's happening at Manchester Airport is simply amazing, and elsewhere, as I've mentioned before about Pakistan, international. If this tax goes up, we would lose that opportunity to actually further connect globally. And with the aviation industry and innovation, that where it's going, then that could halt on that. Good example is the advent of the Dreamliner 787 aircraft. That aircraft was designed to connect regional areas across the globe, so that passengers are flying less into hubs and then taking a flight from there, and vice versa. So you're actually increasing connectivity. So, good example, as Graham's mentioned, Emirates. So that's a classic example. I want to see a lot more of that because it has a less impact on the environment. Every time you take off from the land, that's nitrous oxide emissions that's being emitted. So we want to reduce that. So I feel that's really, really important. The other aspect, another example, just thought about this morning, is the live music industry. And I got this stat from the Michael Jackson trial in LA when AEG, the live music promoter, was given evidence. And they were saying that in terms of market, London is the biggest live music market in the world. In terms of our venues, in terms of our well connectivity, that is a money maker for us, and we far exceed second place, which is New York City. So I am extremely worried with this tax going up and going up year on year. It will have an impact on whether people want to see Lady Gaga, Bruce Springsteen, what have you. So I'm particularly worried about that. The third area is the higher education sector, particularly looking at overseas students. In Newcastle, 2 world-class universities. You've got students from various walks of life all over the world actually studying here. That market brings £5 billion into our economy. And if you include all the other aspects about those friends and family from them actually visiting and actually investing into the actual economy, that brings that total up to nearly £10 billion. With all the the visa restriction that's coming in place, APD will have an even bigger impact and could affect our regional cities. Nottingham, Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool, all those areas, Manchester. These students bring in and actually invest in the area. I was walking around Newcastle, I was absolutely amazed. I went to that Chinese supermarket near St James's Park, which I haven't seen before. It's absolutely amazing that we're bringing, you know, this diversity in. It's creating mini markets, it's creating that connectivity, and I'm extremely worried about that. And higher education for me is a growth area, so I'm particularly worried about that. I'm going to quickly go onto the environment aspect, because I know many of you, I've been speaking on the stand and people saying, well, you know, we should ban flying altogether, etc. So I am concerned about the environment. I'm concerned about climate change. And that's why whenever I fly, I always pay on offsetting tax. But for me, APD distorts that. It encourages people to fly more because people are going to avoid paying that tax wherever possible. One example, my little sister, she's coming to visit me in London, and she's coming in from Toronto. She is not flying direct to London, she is flying direct to Frankfurt, and she's going to get a connecting flight from Frankfurt to London and back, simply because she doesn't want to pay £60 or £70 in APD to fly direct out of the UK. You're going to have massive ramifications of that. Airlines, as people have mentioned, they are pulling out. Two examples. AirAsia X had flights from Stansted, then to Gatwick. They were going to open up a flight to Manchester. They have scrapped that now. Other airlines who've been given opportunities, as Graham was saying, fifth freedom rights, whereby airlines can fly, from the origin to the destination and actually take an onward flight. There's only one airline in the UK which has exercised those rights. That's Pakistan International Airlines on a daily flight from Manchester to New York. Cathay Pacific have flight rights between Manchester and Hong Kong via Moscow. They have not taken them up because of this tax. So in terms of the the environment, so that's a particular area. So sorry, I'll just give you into things. In terms of alternatives to the APD, as sorry, Graham has mentioned. Sorry, just getting my thoughts. Basically, he was saying that we should have the emissions trading scheme. I'm absolutely supportive of that. I do. Yeah. Yeah, you said that. Yeah, I'm absolutely supportive of the emissions trading scheme. We need to use that as the tax in terms of actually looking at improving our behaviour. But with APD, how much money of APD has actually gone into improving quality of life, the environmental projects, all of that? There's no money gone into that. So I'm pretty surprised by that. So I'm going to stop there because I want to open it up to debate. But thank you very much. Thanks.